Hello, this is SK Williams, and today I would like to talk to you about our all-impending doom, for we have entered the apocalypse. We are going to die. Or at least many of us will. For this is the great plague of 2020, the scourge of the earth that will condemn many to an early grave and see the landscape littered with the bodies of the slain. We have entered into the dark times, the times of pestilence, the time of the plague. I am, of course, referring to the coronavirus, which has managed to successfully create a state of quarantine that has spread around the world. We are very much experiencing what, for want of a better term, could be described as a prison planet situation. The term prison planet is famous today for Alex James's use of it, but the term actually dates back to the 1970s with biblical prophecy writers such as Hal Lindsey. I don't know who originated the term specifically, and I'm not going to look it up right now, but it doesn't really matter, because the term is apt. Our planet has become a prison in which we are incarcerated. The questions about that incarceration, though, are: is it for a legitimate reason, or are we being unjustly confined? And if it is unjust, is it morally unjust in that the people who are imprisoning us are doing so malevolently? Or is it something in which they genuinely believe is helping us, but which is unjust on a technical level, whereas they are not unjust people necessarily, but they are doing an unjust thing motivated out of a legitimate concern? Some people believe that the coronavirus situation is actually a conspiracy, that the world government and other powers that be have colluded together to orchestrate a situation in which we are all being imprisoned, either to condition us to being used to accepting authority and having our freedoms taken away, or perhaps to facilitate some sort of economic disaster, or to help create new laws which will help them control us. It doesn't really matter. The general gist of it is that there is no real threat. There is simply a crisis being exploited for some nefarious ends, some even going so far as to either say the coronavirus itself was a manufactured bioweapon, or saying it doesn't exist at all. On the other end of the spectrum are those who believe that the virus is very real, was not created by man, or at the very least, if it was accidentally released on the scale it has been, and that what is happening is being done out of the utmost concern for the people, and that it is indeed the right thing to do because it could harm us. And others think that perhaps it's not the right thing to do, but it is at least being done with good intentions. I don't fall into either of those categories, though. I believe the coronavirus is a very real virus, and that it is indeed a threat, but I think that the threat that it poses has been exaggerated to a considerable degree. So it brings us to a question. If our planet is now a prison, who is our jailer? Who is keeping us imprisoned? And why? And to answer that question, I think that ultimately it is not a virus that is keeping us incarcerated. And it is not so much the government, although the governments are the ones imposing the standards, but I think what is governing the situation right now is fear. I believe that we are so afraid of the virus that we have amplified it in our heads to being something vastly worse than it really is. And the more people react to the virus, the more other people see their reaction and have their own reaction. It's rather like a chain reaction. We see one person deciding to stock up on extra hand sanitizer, and before we know it, other people want even more hand sanitizer to make sure they have enough, and then they see the empty shelves and they say, well, if the shelves are going empty of hand sanitizer, I must have my toilet paper. And once they've taken away all the toilet paper, they would say, oh my, I guess this crisis is real, let's buy some more food. And before long, the governments are panicking and they're saying we should issue guidelines, and then all of a sudden you see stores closing early, you see limited staff, you see people setting up barriers between their clerks and their customers, you see restaurants closing all but their drive-through menus. And people see all that and say, oh my, Corona must have gotten even worse. Quick, let's hide in our houses. And then soon you have announcements saying to stay home and to socially distance, and it just amplifies in our heads this image of the coronavirus as this impending doom, this apocalypse, and the simple truth of the matter is, it's not. I've discussed atheists quite often on this channel, and I'm going to use them as a bit of an example. It's rather like when the atheists point to the witch trials. They keep saying, look how bad religion is. Religion causes witch trials. We would have never had witch trials in the Dark Ages with all those innocent women burned at the stake if not for religion. And of course, most witches were hanged rather than burned. The witch trials were early modern, not medieval, but that doesn't matter. What matters is, they like saying that because of religion, people were afraid of witches, and they overreacted and they killed innocent people. But luckily, in our more secular age, we believe in science, not religion. Sure, there are still religious people, but it's tempered by secular society, and we won't have those fears. But what the atheists don't seem to understand is that the witch trials didn't happen because there's this thing called religion that makes people who are ordinary sensible become unhinged and insane and start reacting. So that if we remove that thing called religion, people will start thinking sensibly again. They will start looking at facts and logic and science, and we will not have these panics. What caused the witch trials was not religion. What caused the witch trials was fear, social anxiety, and it was compounded by a pre-existing culture disposed to such anxiety. The Protestant Reformation had just begun. People did not know what to believe, what to turn to. Governments were in tumult. And again, atheists say, see how bad religion is, it caused this. But governments go into tumult even on the things we say aren't religion. Any major change does this. And they began to panic already. So, if crops began to fail because it was a bad year, or people began getting sick in villages, it was easy to try and find a simple scapegoat that was easy to understand, that we could blame it on and take definitive action against. And motivated by that fear, combined with a need to feel like you're still in some control of your own life, the witch trials happened, and the same is happening with Corona. In that utopian vision the atheists imagine, in which religion has died and reason prevails, and we live in a secular world with no religion in it, it simply isn't true that the bad things that religion caused will go away. Because religion didn't cause those bad things. The idea that believing in gods and the supernatural made people act this way is the greatest disservice to the study of history atheists do. Especially since they like pretending that secularism is the opposite of religion and that atheism is the opposite of religion. Atheism is defined as a lack of a religion just as much as it is a lack of belief in a god. But for all their complaints about the bad things done because of religion, they don't seem to understand that these bad things happen because of human nature, not because of religion. Religion is itself nothing more than a belief system people hold to, and ultimately the things we use to replace religion with are just other forms of religion. We may not like applying the word religion to things like secular humanism or secularism or even science, but they are effectively those things if we start using them in the same way. That's why Sam Harris's moral landscape that says we don't need religion to base our morals on is a bit ridiculous. Sam Harris is basing his morals on religion. It's just that he's not basing them on theistic religion. Ultimately, religion did not cause the witch trials, or at least this thing called religion that the atheists suppose and want rid of. Human nature did. And it is human nature that is causing the egregious fear of the coronavirus. You see, we live in a society that is much like the world of Europe during the Protestant Reformation. We live in a world of high stress, and we live in a world of constant change and uncertainty. We live in a world in which people have largely felt that they have lost control. We live in a world in which situations have become so complex people can't understand them even at the top. We live in a world where the way we are told to live just feels wrong and does not bring us happiness, but we are told we are wrong for not feeling happy. We are told we are wrong for not agreeing. So we accept it and try and pretend we are happy, but we're not, and life just doesn't seem to be working out, at least for a large number of people. And even for those who are actually content on an individual level, you still have a situation in which they must contend with a society that is drowning in this social anxiety. And then along comes Corona. Corona, or COVID-19, gives you a clear name to apply, a clear thing to fight. Sure, it's a disease. You can't just look at it physically like we would a person. But it is an enemy to fight, something you can conceptualize in your mind. It gives you a clear, definitive thing to strive against. At the same time, the struggle against Corona matches the inner struggle we've had as a society, perhaps on an unconscious and symbolic level rather than a rational one and a conscious level, but we've been socially distant for a long time. We typically hide our true selves and try and conform to the outer way people are. We've been isolating ourselves. We've been diminishing ourselves. All those social anxieties, all those fears, all that sense of wrongness in the world that we can't quite articulate, it's all been there below the surface, and now Corona comes up and, well, we finally have an outlet for all those anxieties, don't we? A way to vent those frustrations, a way to conceptualize those fears, to contextualize them in a way that makes sense without having to actually address the problems in the world. The problems we see daily, the problems we live through daily, the problems that occur because our society is sick, because our society doesn't know how to live anymore. We have wanted to react this way for a long time anyway, but we tell ourselves we can't. It's irrational to do so. And when COVID-19 comes, it gives us an excuse to do so, but more than just an excuse. It gets to embody those fears for us, and lets us deal with at least the emotions, if not the cause. But the problem with all this is that, much like the witch hunts, we exaggerate. We make the situation far worse than it is, because the real situation which generated the emotions is far worse. So, while we don't necessarily understand it on a conscious level, we lash out at Corona, because we cannot lash out at that society, but the problems that were not caused by Corona will still be there when Corona isn't. We will have been given a momentary reprieve and a way of venting our emotions, but they'll creep back. They'll bottle up and, like a pressure cooker, build up pressure until they finally explode. That's what I fear will happen. Corona also has the potential of doing something else the witch hunts did. Often, when you name a culprit that you wish to blame social ills on, whether they are guilty or not, whether it's exaggerated or not, at the very least it brings societies together, which Corona is not doing. It's causing us to be separated. And at the very least, once we have dealt with the witch, once they are dead, we can get on with our lives. But I'm not certain that can happen in Corona. Witch hunts did not inherently damage the economy, for example. Corona will. So Corona is potentially the worst witch of all. And again, I'm not saying there's no real disease, there is. And we really should take precautions. I'm not arguing that we should take no precautions at all and carry on as if there is no disease, with life as usual. Indeed, one of the problems I've been pointing out is life as usual itself should be reformed. What I'm saying is, while there is a real disease, and while we really should take certain precautions, we are exaggerating our response to it due to pre-existing anxieties. Fear drives us, for we are a people given to fear. Jesus once said that we should not fear, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt said there is nothing to fear but fear itself. And yet, we fear. We give in to fear. We are children of fear. Fear can also be a good thing if it keeps us out of danger, but we should learn to control it and rise above it. But it seems our resolve has been eroded, and Corona has come to collect the interest of all their social anxiety. Again, I am not saying to not fear at all. I'm not saying that there is no danger. There is. I think the danger is exaggerated, though, and I think we should let go of our fear of it. Turn to God in prayer. Turn to each other and our friends, and realize we are overreacting. And then admit to ourselves we overreacted, because there is something wrong in our society, at a fundamental level, and that we need to work on that. I don't have much else to say, so I'll sign off. Thank you, God bless, and goodbye.